So a very good evening and welcome to the new session of Pre-Med Pro, and today we are going to continue with the excretion in the chapter of human physiology, and this is the lecture number 5, and we'll start from the cortex region of the kidney and we'll end up with the micturition and the later parts. Okay, so first I'll try to say that within few days the examination registration will start for the Neet, and probably you all are expecting the exam on the May. So I think all of you guys are trying hard and studying very well. So I like to say that go through my videos very carefully, because I don't think any further question will from the physiology part will come outside of this videos. So give the first topic as cortex. Okay, so let me draw a thing first. This is the okay. See, here I am not going to make a fine arts, but just these are the pictures to make you understand. So what's happening here? It is the 300 millimole milliosmol pressure. Here the water is reabsorbed from this part, and this is the ascending vasa recta. So here it will go to 400. Here it will go to 600. Here it will go to 1000. Okay, now, and here it will go to up to 1200. Okay, now here it's 300, it's 400, it's 500, and it's 600. Okay, so now the NaCl, it's 300. Then of its NaCl, it's the descending VR, and it's okay. Now what happens? Here the molecule will go down. Now here the concentration slightly goes up from 600 to 800 and further to 1000 and then to 1200. Okay, it is the inner medulla. I have drawn yesterday also. It is the inner medulla, and later that is the medullary interstitium. Okay, now what happens here? It's the collecting duct. Okay, now here the urea is somehow reabsorbed. Okay, now in the next part we're going to start with the two main electrolytes. Here the two main electrolytes that maintains the high osmolarity of the interstitium are one is NaCl and another is urea. Okay, so the two main electrolytes that maintain the osmolarity, that is a high osmolarity, you can say high osmolarity of the high osmolarity of the interstitium are 1. NaCl is from the ascending loop. NaCl is reabsorbed. NaCl is reabsorbed from the ascending loop. Ascending vasa recta. Urea from the collecting duct. Okay. Okay. Now some retained urea. Some urea is retained. Some urea is retained in the interstitium. Some urea is retained in the interstitium to keep up the osmolarity. And some goes back to ascending loop of Henle. Okay. Now some urea is retained back to keep the osmolarity, because without holding back the urea, our nephron cannot detect the osmolarity that is required. Okay. So a few amount of urea is retained back, and the residual amount is thrown into the ascending loop of Henle. Okay. Now H2O enter to the ascending VR. Later that release NaCl. Now NaCl enter the descending VR and release H2O. Okay. H2O is released. Now what happens? Now come to the next interesting part, that is the micturition. You get to know that what is micturition. Micturition is somewhat a nervous stimulation to the bladder. Basically the urge to urinate, to pass the urine, generally gets greater when we see a toilet or when you see a washroom. Okay, so urge gets much greater. Okay, because it is a reflex that is generated from our spinal cord, the sacral plexus. So it stimulates, it contracts the urinary bladder and opens the sphincter. There are two sphincters in the penile urethra, the outer sphincter and the inner sphincter. Both the sphincter gets opened, and ultimately we pass out the urine. Okay. Now come to the next part. It's the micturition. Micturition reflex. The process of release of urine. Stretch receptor. Here in the bladder, we have stretch receptor. So urine is filled up in the bladder. Okay, this is the urine. Okay, now this is the urethral sphincter. So here we have some receptors. Here we have some stretch receptors. Okay. Now upon filling of bladder, stretch receptors activated 2. A sensory neuron carries the information, a sensory receptor carries the information from bladder to the CNS. A sensory receptor carries the information from the bladder to the cerebral nervous system, central nervous system. Okay. The next, the motor neurons carry the information to one, the two part, the bladder and the urethral sphincter. The bladder and the urethral sphincter. The bladder consists of detrusor muscles. Detrusor muscle, which generally contracts. Upon getting the signal, the detrusor muscle generally contracts. Okay, and in the urethral sphincter, it relaxes and open. So this phenomenon is called the micturition. Okay, now come to the next part that is required. The next part is of urine. What is the quantity of urine that we pass out per day? I have said in the earlier videos also. It's 1 to 1.5 liter per day. Okay, the quantity. So pH of our normal urine is 6 and it's slightly acidic. Okay, 25 to 30 gram of urea is eliminated per day. The fourth one is slightly yellowish in color and due to the presence of urochrome. Urochrome. Okay. Now, urochrome is derived from the bile pigment bilirubin and biliverdin. Derived from the bile pigment bilirubin and biliverdin. The next one is diabetes mellitus. Okay. In diabetes mellitus, the glycosuria, glucose in urine, and ketonuria, ketone bodies in urine are indicative of diabetes mellitus. Okay, the presence of glucose, that is glucose in urine, is called the glycosuria. Presence of blood in urine is called hematuria. Presence of ketone in urine is ketonuria. Okay, and urine, the presence of ketone and the glucose in the urine indicates the patient is suffering from diabetes mellitus. Okay, the next topic we come to a note. Keep a note that insulin, a hormone of pancreas, that reduces blood glucose, a hormone of the pancreas that reduces the blood glucose, and it promotes, while reducing the blood glucose, it promotes cellular uptake of glucose. So due to any reason, no insulin production happens, no insulin. So insulin, therefore what happens? Cells will not utilize glucose. Cells will not utilize glucose. So what happens? The glucose in the blood increases, because without insulin, how can the glucose convert in transfer into the cell? It's not possible for the cell to take the glucose without the help of the insulin, because there's a presence of the GLUT4 enzyme. Okay. Next, excess amount of blood, excess amount released via urine. It's called glycosuria. When this blood glucose gets over to 180 millimole, it generally damages the kidney. That damage, as a chronic damage due to diabetes, is called the diabetic nephropathy. Okay. So cells will now, here what will happen? Cells now do beta oxidation, that is fats to produce energy. Okay. Now what happens? Byproduct of fat becomes ketone, which passes through urine, leading to ketonuria. Okay, that leads to ketonuria. Okay, now comes to the next part. The regulation of the kidney function. It's a very important topic. The regulation of kidney function. The regulation of kidney function. 1. By hypothalamus. 2. By triglyceric acid. That is the it's not like that. It's not triglyceric acid. It's by juxtaglomerular apparatus. JGA. And third one is by heart. So in a case of cardiac patients, we generally see chronic kidney disease in the later part of that progression. Okay. In the basics, I'll write the basics. If the GFR is increased, what happens? Blood volume increases. Blood H2O increases. Blood pressure increases, ultimately leading to GFR increment. And if GFR decreases, blood volume decreases, blood H2O decreases. Third, blood pressure decreases, ultimately leading to low GFR. Okay. Now come to the next part. By hypothalamus. What happens by hypothalamus? What does the hypothalamus controls? By hypothalamus. So when does it operate? When the hypothalamus operates, it operates during low GFR. Thus, the blood pressure BP decreases, blood volume decreases, and blood H2O decreases. It is generally seen in a patient of septic shocks. Okay, osmoreceptors can detect change in osmolarity. Osmo detectors contain a body fluid, and then can signal to make necessary changes. Okay, osmo detectors can detect it and then can make the necessary changes that is required. Okay, come to the next part. What does the hypothalamus have the osmoreceptors? Hypothalamus have the osmoreceptors. Let it be the hypothalamus. This contains the osmoreceptors. These may be the osmoreceptors. What happens? The osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus activates as the osmolarity gets up. Okay, post pituitary, that is neurohypophysis. Post pituitary, that is the neurohypophysis, to send signal to hypothalamus for release of ADH, vasopressin from the neurohypophysis, Okay. In the post pituitary, what is the function of the post pituitary? So, what does the post pituitary does? The post pituitary does the following function: release ADH, can also be called as the vasopressin. Thus, it acts on DCT, distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. That acts on H2O, reabsorbs. So what happens? H2O is reabsorbed, then the blood volume will go up. Obviously, the blood pressure will go up. Ultimately increases the GFR. And another function of the ADH, is that it constricts blood vessel. Blood pressure BP goes up, thus the GFR goes up. Okay, the GFR also goes up. Now come to the next part. By juxtaglomerular apparatus. It controls the RAS mechanism. RAS, that is renin, aldosterone, angiotensinogen mechanism. RAS mechanism. There is renin. Keep in mind renin in kidney, KIDNEY, single N. So renin, single N. And there is another enzyme called renin, RENNIN. It is a proteolytic enzyme secreted from the stomach. So renin, just read the word RENNIN. It is in the intestine, and RENIN, it is the kidney. Okay, renin, angiotensinogen, angiotensin, aldosterone system. Okay, it operates. I will teach the RAS system in the later videos. It operates in lowering the GFR, in lowering the BP, in lowering the blood volume, and as well as the blood H2O. Okay. So keeping in mind, I am stopping here, and I will try to start the RAS pathway in the next videos, and as well as the later part of the topic. I think 2 or 3 lectures will nearly complete this topic. So till then, it's good night. Please revise this chapter, and please subscribe this channel, and if you have not subscribed yet, please share it with your friends, and please like and do make comments that what more you need from this channel to crack it. Okay, till then, good night.